Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Innovation Showcase. The main purpose of this ongoing series is to inform viewers about exciting innovations and creative individuals across the fields of business, science, technology, education, and the arts. Today, via Zoom, we're fortunate to have as our guest Raku Inoue. Raku is a highly accomplished multidisciplinary artist who was born in Tokyo and is now based in Montreal. While he used to be known for his polymer clay sculptures, his recent creations mainly feature organic materials like flowers, leaves, and stems of various flora species. During the program, Raku will share and discuss a variety of his artwork, and in the process will come to better understand and appreciate how it is through these different methods and techniques that he continues to challenge himself to grow and further develop as an artist. Let's start by meeting Raku and then hear about his fascinating development as an artist. Raku, welcome. So delighted you're able to be here.
Thank you very much, Jay. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
When I first contacted you, I had read a wonderful article about you in the publication My Modern Met that featured some of your current floral work and thought, oh, that'd be great to talk about. But the more you shared, the more I read, I thought an even richer story is to hear about your development of how you began and where you are today and the different methods and techniques that we're so going to hear and see that you've continued to explore and said in the introduction, challenge yourself to keep growing is really fascinating. So before we jump right to some wonderful images, would you please start by just sharing briefly a little bit about your background and how your interest in art first developed?
Of course. Well, I think my interest in art started a long time ago when I was back in Japan, still a kid. I used to love creating things, making things, whether it's painting, whether it's playing with cardboards, making stuff with papers. There was this after school program that we used to go after school where the teacher taught us to cook. They taught us to sew. They even taught us to make our own paper, by dissolving milk cartons and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I think since I was a kid, I was a very curious child regarding, all the things that we can make out of anything really. So that was the first my first introduction to a creative um, way of seeing things really. And then I think as I grew up, my mother always used to tell me, try to expand your horizon, whether it's in your taste of food or music, or it can be even TV programs, as a child. Um, so I think that stuck with me to this day, really. So my interest is really, I love creating, but I also love expanding and trying out new stuff and combine different materials, techniques, and maybe, because at this time it's very hard to come up with anything unique, really. A lot of things have been done and have been tried already. So I think one way we can push ourselves further is to infuse different techniques and make new things and make new interesting ideas come true.
Well, as we're about to see, you've definitely taken your mother's suggestion advice to heart. And let's start with this wonderful series of images with one of your earlier areas, polymer clay sculptures.
Yes, this was actually, it was made a long time ago, really. This was a time where I started learning photography. um and also I learned also digital editing via Photoshop and whatnot.
Hmm.
And but then I also love making stuff with my hand. So what I did is like I said, I try to infuse many techniques. So, I try to create my own scenery, because when I learned photography, what we really were taught is to photograph object, landscapes, stuff like that, which was very interesting to me. And I learned a lot about lighting, shadow,
Mm.
how to make the color pop, the visual, um, how do I say, how to compose the visual composition,
Mhm.
stuff like that. But at one point, I kind of got bored, and I thought I needed to push myself a little bit further. So I started to create my own scenery. That's when I started looking into polymer clay, natural clay, stuff that I can sculpt with. This is also something that I think I retained from my mother, because my mother used to paint a lot and also do sculpture with clay. And she would also make her own sceneries and stuff like that. So I think that was a huge influence. It had a huge influence on me. And then as I started making landscapes, because really loved to make illustrations also, without being too much of a 3D composition. So I make these, which
Mm.
is a little bit closer to a regular illustration. It's just made with clay.
Ah.
Yeah, so it's less of a 3D um, scenery, but it's more flat. But I would take those pictures from a bird's eye view, and then I would edit them in Photoshop. Yeah, this would be also the same technique. But I think you can see that even though I create my work with clay, and I would work them in Photoshop, there's always a theme of nature that you can sense within my work. So I think you'll see throughout the upcoming images that the theme of nature will always remain. And this is something that I would notice myself many years later, since that time. But yeah, it's
While we want to move on, and here we see related to animation as
yes,
well.
yeah.
Just a few thoughts on how that interest that's led to the thread throughout your life's work, nature, came about.
Hmm. I think nature was, I mean, living in Japan as a kid, especially in the 80s and 90s, um, we used to go play outside a lot. A lot of my friends didn't have video games. It wasn't a thing back then. Internet didn't exist. So our way as a kid would be to go outside and play outside. Um, and then, in Japan, there's a huge variety of insects, and also even landscapes, animals, flora, fauna. So without me knowing at the time, I think I captured a lot of my environment,
Uh-huh.
and then that would inevitably influence me in all aspects of my life. And
Let's move on to one of the next stages of your career and floral creations.
yes, so this is the time I started to make my own sculpture, but using real organic materials.
Mm.
Around this time, I bought a house, and then the house came with a nice backyard. So there was a huge opportunity to do some gardening, and some I would plant flowers, and so I had a lot of materials to play with. So it was for me like a natural progression into my way into real, into using real materials. And for me, it was interesting because before then it was a lot of plastic materials like
Ah,
clays and stuff like that. So it was very refreshing for me. And I remember that my aunt was a ikebana teacher, which is ikebana, which is a traditional Japanese floral arrangement. And I remember going to her galleries and seeing her work displayed there. And I was always fascinated. And she used to say, you know, all seasons has different beauty to offer. And for me, I that stuck with me as well a lot. So I was programmed to see, to perceive the tiny, you know, the tiny things in life.
Mm,
And
mm.
as we often say, you know, when we are able to focus on the tiniest of things, we are able to find happiness much easier. Like we don't have to look far to be happy. So I guess you know, it's a psychological viewpoint. If
Yeah, no, it's infused your whole being, it sounds like. That's
Yeah, exactly.
fabulous.
Yeah.
And related to this, as you mentioned, started working with natural insects.
Yes, this was a huge milestone for my career because this is when I fully committed myself into making floral art.
Mm,
Before then, I was very mixed media. I would go back and forth between painting, illustration, photography, whatever interested me at that time. But that from this time on, I really fully committed, and then I tried to push myself
mm,
into this floral art. And this, yeah, all of these are made around that time. And it's funny because one day it was, I've told this story many times, but it was very windy outside. And we have a nice, very nice rose bush, which was getting blown by the strong wind, and the
mhm,
delicate petals would fall off to the ground. So I felt like it was a huge waste. So I picked those up, came back inside the house, and without really forcing myself, I just made anything that came to
mm,
mind. And the first thing that came to mind was red beetle,
mm.
because I was very fascinated by the world of entomology. I think it was a uh, I guess it was meant to be, if I could say like that.
These are
But
just stunning.
oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's very interesting because I get to not only study the insect itself, but also the materials that I'm working with, and their relation between fauna and flora. And as I said, throughout the season, many different flowers will bloom, and then will wither, and then new flower will bloom come next season. So there's a lot of variety, and there's a lot of things that we can we can use to create our
You
uh,
know, while we have some other areas we definitely want to move on to,
yeah.
briefly share how you go about creating, say, the images that we've just seen. Do you sketch before? Do you just start digging in? Do you have a sense what you're going to have as your final product? Just a little bit about the process, please.
Yeah, of course. Because I work with ephemeral material, I don't have much time once I start a project to finish everything. So a rough sketch, yes, I would definitely do a rough sketch, but that's pretty much it. So it's sometime I would completely miss my mark and end up with something that I don't like,
Mhm.
but other time it's a total success. So it's taking risk a lot of times. But then, you know, because I made so much of them in the past, there's a rough template, but there's no precise way to making these. It's really it really, you know, sometime I would just walk on the street, and then I would find a interesting material that you know that make my imagination pop, and then I would have the visual already in my mind. But other times I will have to think about it and then go back to sketches. And so it really varies depending on the day.
Well,
But
given how you've continued to grow as an artist, your comfort with taking risk is really admirable. And I think a thread that helps you keep proceeding and growing as an artist. And here we're going to see a continuation with mixed media, a few images here.
yes. Yeah, as I said, I also love painting. So this is obviously a watercolor. Watercolor is something that fascinates me. Admittedly, it's not my how can I say? I'm not a master at watercolor, but for me, it's especially if I'm making something for myself, personal project. I try to have fun, and then I try to push myself at the same time. So for me, um, mastering a technique is not really uh, it takes time to master anything. So for
Mhm.
me, I try not to focus on that too much. I just try to try to come up with new ideas and then try to implement that. And if I'm able to do that, then it's a success for me.
Well, your enjoyment with play is a trait that often hear inventors, creators like yourself talk about. And it often traces back, as you shared at the beginning, to childhood, where you're playing around with materials, feeling comfortable with that, not sure where it's going, and then ending up with creations like we see right in front of us, for the willingness to take risks and try something new. And we're going to move on just to show the range. These are incredible. A few graphic design examples here.
Yes. Yeah, I've studied graphic design in the past. It was actually I could confidently say it was one of the most impactful
Hmm.
time of my career, really. Um, the image composition, how the eye moved throughout the image, all of that was very new to me at that point. And again, combining different techniques, different materials, I was able to create these visuals. Um,
And then some work with brushwork.
Yes, yeah. In Japan, when I used to live in Japan, we had calligraphy class.
Hmm.
We had to dissolve our own ink. Sometimes we had to make our own paper, and then we would practice calligraphy. So this was part of the mandatory classes when I was in Japan. And when I came here, I thought, why not? I have all the materials, so why not try again. So this was all using old techniques, but with uh, my current skill.
It's fabulous, fabulous.
Thank you.
And these are really just incredible coming up. Hand-drawn illustrations?
Yes, yeah,
Wow.
those were yeah. I guess my first creative endeavor was illustrations and painting. That's where I really started. So illustration, I think it will always stick with me. It's something I love to do. I just love how I can play with colors. Um, it's just it's completely different when I compare it to sculptures, because
Yeah.
sculptures and photography, everything is set. Everything, you can play with the techniques, but if you don't have the right light exposure, if your image are too dark, there's a certain um constraint, is that the right word?
Uh-huh.
But with illustration, for me personally, I feel a little bit more free. A flower doesn't need to be a certain color. It can be purple, it can be red, anything is possible, really. But if I try to do that in Photoshop, then I would have to edit the color, and then it might feel artificial. So for me, yeah, again, illustration
Oh,
is a way
the
to
the colors are striking. Uh, Not to remark the resemblance too of the individuals you're creating. Going to move on to yet another area, de further developing paper sculptures.
Yes. Again, with nature themed, but paper art is something that is very known and popular in Japan. I remember doing origami, which is folding papers in Japan. My aunt would teach me many techniques, and then I would try to make those those tiny characters. And for me, at this time, again, I tried to merge different techniques. So I would photograph my own scenery. I
Mm.
would then break it down in Photoshop, have them printed, and then I would cut them, and then I would lay them in a way that almost like a theatrical display.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you go to opera, almost, where you have many layers of 2D images, but when you combine everything, it feels 3D, it feels alive. So that's something that was very interesting to me. Yeah, because I started with 2D illustration. When I moved to 3D, it really opened up a whole world of of how I can make my visual come through.
Really incredible to see. And we're coming to one of the last stages, more current stage, where I first became introduced to you. And these were some of your advanced sculptures, which
Yes.
are just mind-blowing, as we're going to enjoy several of them as you share a little insight.
Yeah, I have a fun fact about this white tiger. I remember I went to a local flower shop and I just bought any type of flower really, which I often do. And then I would come back and I would try to make something with them. But at that time there was this white rose, and when I took one petal, it had this roundness of the mouth area.
Huh,
So that was the, once I had that part, that three petals, so the two on the left, on the right, and the lower jaw,
uh-huh.
once I had that, everything came to my mind.
Wow.
It's funny how one piece of the
Mm.
puzzle can evolve into a whole thing. So it's yeah, this tiger will always be a reminder of that. It's that when you have an open mind and you're able to seize the opportunity at the right time, you will notice that there are so many ideas, there's so many keys, and it's yeah, it's one of my it's fun for me to just to spend the morning just trying to see what I can do. It's
Yeah, I mean, that, as we said earlier, seems to permeate your whole life development, and a trait that unfortunately not too many of us share. We're sort of rigid in our thinking and programmed to operate in a certain manner, but to be open like yourself just has these incredible possibilities. It's sort of like going into a candy store every day, I think, and you're just seeing, oh, what can I come up with now
exactly,
through
yeah.
what I have here? I mean, these are just remarkable.
Yeah, thank you. It's because I do this for a living, so when I work with a client, there's always a certain guideline. There's always something, you have to work with other teams, which I love to do also. It's just when it's personal, there's no restraint there. You can just do whatever. So I think it's right time to push ourselves and try something new, and who knows, you might even come up with new ideas that you can also apply to your career.
Hmm.
Yeah, it happened a lot of times for myself also.
And here we see a little of the process, I think.
Yes, yeah. So the skeleton is made with foam core boards, and then I stick those materials afterwards. Especially the gorilla actually was the easier to make because it's all dried up, but everything else was a race to the finish line. So once I started make especially the buffalo, because there's a lot of green leaves and fresh flowers which are very delicate, so I had to be very quick on that one. So
Nice.
there's a little bit of not stress is not the right word, but definitely a challenge when you're working with ephemeral material.
For sure,
um
for sure. And just a couple of words on where this is taking you with some animation.
Yes. Animation for me, personally, was always the end game of any type of creative endeavor. So when I used to do polymer clay, then one of the last project that I did with polymer clay was a polymer clay animation.
Mm.
The same thing goes here, I think. When I started, uh, when I felt comfortable working with ephemeral materials, and then I knew that, the next step would be to have those creations being animated. So whether it's stop motion animation, or it can be CGI Blender animation, because I do also work with CGI app.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I just love things. I love it. I loved seeing things come alive, to have them yeah, move throughout the scene.
Raku, unfortunately, you only have a minute or so left. So much more we could hear about. But just very briefly, when you look back, sort of a retrospective that you were kind enough to share with us of your career, what are your thoughts about your development and where you are today?
What I think I certainly feel like I'm not at the finish line. I still feel like I have a lot to learn. There's a lot of materials that I haven't worked with. But for me, at this moment of my career, it's to take it a little bit slower, because when I used to be younger, I used to grind a lot. My career was a very important aspect of my life, and I used to create day out, day night, and I also went through how to say burnouts and stuff like
Mm.
that.
Mhm.
So for me, you know, just like exercising, your downtime is also very important. You cannot exercise all day, all week. You're just gonna break down. But your growth is actually being done when during the downtime. So for me, when as a creative, it's almost the same thing. It's in my downtime that I'm able to find inspiration and motivation and energy to continue doing the stuff that I love.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, unfortunately, we really have come to the end. It's gone so fast, been
Indeed.
fascinating. We'll have some contact information for viewers to continue to follow your work. I'm very eager to both see your current work even more, but where you're going to be taking us into the future. So continued success with future endeavors.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here.
Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.